Hey guys! Today I want to talk with you about From Blood and Ash, a fantasy romance novel by Jennifer Armentrout. This novel was first published in 2020 and it's the first book in the Blood and Ash series. As of the recording of this video, the series includes 5 published novels, and it is believed that the 6th novel will be the last. It's important to point out that despite this being a fantasy series, when first published, From Blood and Ash has become a winner for the best romance of the year on Goodreads. As per usual, we will begin this video with a short synopsis, then proceed to the non-spoiler review, and wrap this video up with the spoilers. If you haven't had a chance to read From Blood and Ash yet, then do not worry, I will make sure to let you know when the spoilers begin. So in this novel, we're being transferred to a different world. A world in which unexplainable evil exists and in which rules must be obeyed. Poppy, our main female lead, is someone called a maiden. Maiden is less than a person and more of a symbol. Someone who is born to bring the world into a new era. She lives a secluded life where she is not allowed to speak to anyone or be touched by anyone. Her only purpose in life is to wait for ascension. Poppy, however, doesn't always want to be on her best behavior. She is a young, opinionated woman full of life and dreams. And one day she meets Hawkeye, an honor-bound guard swore to protect the maiden at all costs. And yet, despite being the person responsible for keeping Poppy contained, he starts to push her buttons and forces her to question her reality. So, this book was something. When I think rationally, I have to admit that From Blood and Ash, especially being the first book in the series, has a lot of weak points. The story is quite predictable, foreshadowing is not subtle, the supernatural elements and the world structure is only brushed upon, and the main love interest, aka Hawkeye, in time gets borderline controlling when it comes to our main heroine. To add to that, the beginning of the story is somewhat slow while the world and its rules are being established. Armentrout introduces us to a world divided into 2 realms. The realm of Ascended, where the strong-willed Poppy resides as the maiden, and the realm of the Dark One, shrouded in mystery and danger. All we know is that Ascendance means life. It means peace and prosperity, while the Dark One and his followers can only bring death and destruction. Poppy is a weird part of this weird world. On one hand, she seems rather insignificant. Her opinions don't matter, her wishes don't matter, even her face, constantly hidden behind a white veil, in theory could be replaced by any other face of any other woman. Poppy as a person doesn't matter. Yet the maiden is the cornerstone of the world the Ascended had managed to build for themselves. And Poppy's yearning for freedom and independence contradicts with everything the maiden is supposed to stand for. Maiden is supposed to live this suffocating life so that the world would be safe, so that the people would stop dying, so that the war between the Ascended and the Dark One could finally end. Anyhow, this book is not really about that. The monsters and the myths, the magic, this world structure is only a backdrop for what is actually important in this book: romance. Now, there are other interesting and popular fantasy novels, such as Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard, Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros, Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo, or Cruel Prince by Holly Black, that concentrate on telling the story of the fantastic lives of the protagonists while just playing with the idea of romantic relationships on the side. From Blood and Ash turns this completely upside down. The main focus is given to the love story, while everything else is just kinda there. And therefore, I can't really judge this book as a fantasy novel. I have to judge it as a romance. And to be honest, I'm not mad at all. Yes, some of the topics are a little bit heavy-handed, and the lines of consent get a little bit blurred as the book progresses, but despite that, this book gives us exactly what it set out to give: a full-blown teenage dream drama-filled guilty pleasure read. I came here because I was interested in the magical universe. I stayed because of Hawkeye Flynn. Hawkeye is a perfect male protagonist. He's mysterious and a little bit dangerous, but charismatic and easygoing. He's protective, but not overbearing. He's honorable, yet he tends to follow his own moral compass, rather than blindly following authority. And the chemistry between Poppy and her mysterious guard, Hawkeye, is palpable. It simmers beneath the surface, building tension and anticipation. Their love story is addictive, it's engaging, it is entertaining enough that while reading the novel you can quite easily forget that the fantasy aspect is rather weak and reminiscent of common fantasy tropes. That being said, as of now I have read the first 3 books in Blood and Ash series, and I do believe that the fantasy lore gets better as the story progresses. So would I recommend this book for someone who's looking for a well-written original fantasy novel? Not at all. But would I recommend it to someone who feels like escaping their world for a few hours and experiencing a passionate, all-consuming love story? Absolutely. That being said, let's move to the spoiler review so we could talk a little bit more about the plot of the novel. Now, truth be told, at times while preparing for these videos, while writing these reviews, I skip everything else and start right away with writing the spoiler review part. I sit down and just let the words, the thoughts pour out of me because there's just so much that I want to say. There are so many thoughts burning in my head that I just need to share. And once I'm done working on the spoiler review, I put the rest of the scenario on ice because I struggle too much to find a way to talk about a novel without exposing anything that could be considered a spoiler. From Blood and Ash, however, gave me a completely different review writing experience. This is the kind of a novel that you could spend hours discussing without actually giving away any of the important tidbits of information. You don't need to know the storyline in order to explain why Poppy works great as a character, why Hawkeye makes readers swoon, or why they fit so well together as a couple. And if you want to take a more negative approach, you also do not need to spoil anything in order to explain why this fantasy world lacks something, why it just doesn't feel authentic enough. So, since there wasn't any die-hard plot twist, nuanced narratives, or controversial topics we could concentrate on, let's take a few minutes and recap the plot of From Blood and Ash together. We start the novel by meeting Poppy, the virginal symbol of peace and prosperity, in a tavern, where people meet up to drink, gamble, and seek out short-term pleasures. Basically a simple place one should never expect to find a maiden in. However, Poppy's fun is short-lived as her bodyguards show up in the same tavern to presumably relax after a long day. Luckily for her, a friendly waitress offers her a way to hide by sending her into one of the rooms. And while at first we think that her meeting Hawkeye at that particular time in that particular room is a coincidence, as the story progresses we start to understand the actual significance of Poppy being sent there, of Hawkeye knowing who she is. And I loved their first encounter so much. It portrayed efficiently and accurately what these two will be as a couple. And the chemistry between them could be cut with a knife. I have to say that letting them meet like this in the very first chapters of the book probably was the smartest thing the author could have done. You have read the book, you know that the first part of the story is very slow, and to be honest with you, I don't think I could have simply pushed through the first half of the book as easily as I did if I wouldn't have known what type of relationship I can expect from them in the future. With this scene in the tavern, Jennifer Armentrout gave me a taste of what is about to come, and I couldn't wait to get more. Now, do I wish that Poppy would have kept the promise she gave to Hawkeye and stayed in the room waiting for him to return? Yes, absolutely. The book just started and I already couldn't get enough of them. But at the same time, did I love the fact that she took this opportunity to run away and leave Hawkeye wanting? Also yes. Now, after this first meetup, we get to follow Poppy back into her regular life she leads as the Maiden, where we start experiencing the world the author created, which in a very short amount of time managed to raise a significant amount of questions. What exactly are the rules that the Maiden has to obey? Why was Poppy picked as a maiden in the first place? If there have only been 2 maidens in history, then how important maidens can actually be to this world structure? And why exactly does Poppy have magical powers? Do all maidens have them? Is this why she was selected as the maiden? What is ascending? Does it make you immortal? Why does it change the color of your eyes? Does it make you automatically cruel, and does it take away all of your humanity? Other people who ascended and still felt the same emotions mortals do. I had so many questions, they were driving me insane. And yes, towards the end of the book, most of the questions have been either answered completely or the answers were alluded to, but I felt that by not explaining to us properly how the world works, the author did us disservice. It is hard to fight the regime you yourself don't really understand that well. But let's back it up a little and talk about what happened after Poppy came back to the castle. Precisely about her instantly breaking the rules again and heading into town with Victor to help a man who has been injured in a Craven attack and who has proceeded to slowly turn into Craven himself. All of this felt like such an important and secret operation. Them sneaking out of the castle, finding a house that is marked with a handkerchief, taking away the emotional pain of the grieving woman and physical pain of her husband before killing him and ending his suffering. This whole outing was so detailed and so thought through that I can't stress it enough at how surprised I was when this plotline was basically dropped. When I realized that this whole scene was nothing but a setup for future events, as well as a cheap trick to make Poppy seem like a hero in the eyes of the readers, and eventually in the eyes of Hawkeye too. If anything, all through the book, it felt like the author wants us to love Poppy, or wants us to aspire to be like Poppy, to imagine that we are that badass woman. But by not giving her any actual flaws, the author makes her feel more unrealistic, unattainable. Anyhow, shortly after we learn about the curse and the Cravens and Poppy's magical powers, we get to experience an assassination attempt, which honestly doesn't hold any weight in my eyes. And that's mainly because we don't really know anything of substance about Rylan. In a true fantasy novel fashion, we got a few instances in which he was shown to us as a super nice guy, just so that his death would feel more impactful. It didn't. I had to Google his name for the purpose of this video. And of course, the only actual consequence of Rylan's death is that now a spot opened up for new guard, bringing Hawkeye back into the picture. Now, this is when for the first time in the story we have all the main players locked into their positions. Now the true story can finally begin. It didn't. In a weird way, we kept on getting setup after a setup, all leading towards the bigger picture without any short-term payoffs. The storylines, such as the introduction of the Right, the publicly unasked questions of what happens to the second and third born children, the lessons Poppy has to attend, the gossip of the court ladies, or the random killings happening in the castle, none of it could really hold my attention, because my head felt already overloaded with questions I had no answers to. If anything, there are only 3 storylines in this first part of the book that left a lasting impression on me. First, where we get to the Craven attack, which results in Poppy and Hawkeye more or less playfully fighting each other, as well as Hawkeye revealing that he has always been aware that Poppy's the woman he met at the tavern. A storyline in which Hawkeye also delivered one of the best lines in this whole book. The next time you go out, wear better shoes and thicker clothing. Those slippers are likely to be the death of you, and that dress, the death of me. Second, being the first kiss between Poppy and Hawkeye, as besides it being hot as hell, it's also the first time when Poppy puts herself first, where she takes something that she wants without hiding behind a mask. Metaphorically speaking, of course. In this moment, Poppy asks Hawkeye to kiss her as the maiden, not as the faceless, nameless girl she was pretending to be at the tavern. And this is also the first time Poppy voices her dissatisfaction with her position out loud, where she points out that she hopes that she will be deemed unworthy. In my eyes, this is the scene where tables start to turn. Lastly, while talking about important plotlines of the first part of the novel, I have to mention the attack on the castle and the death of the Duke. Now, this is where we learn that Hawkeye is the Dark One. Or at the very least, he's someone who supports the dissenters and their cause. And it's so blatantly obvious that it is Hawkeye who killed the Duke, because honestly, who else? A man who used to secretly beat Poppy is found dead, stabbed through the heart with the cane he used to beat her with. Who else would care enough about Poppy to avenge her in such a manner? I'm honestly not sure how Poppy didn't put two and two together on the spot. I guess we can assume that she was too distressed over the death of Victor to think straight. Now, once Poppy is being sent away to the capital, that's where the story, in my humble opinion, really starts picking up. Up until now, we were locked into a situation with no answers, and no room to breathe, and no room to grow and change. We are, in a way, in a similar state that Poppy was. We could see the things happening around us. We could notice the inexplicable things that others brush under the rug. But we simply didn't have enough information to make sense of what was going on. And once we get on that road, our world as well as our understanding expands. It starts small. We start noticing that Hawkeye knows the names of the people outside the castle. And we start noticing the ways that people react to Hawkeye. Like his mere presence is ought to be celebrated. And then we get all the gut-wrenching big things that come to us in a rapid-fire succession. First of all, Poppy makes a decision to abandon her role as the Maiden. And while for us, the readers, the choice seems like a no-brainer, as we understand how unfair and oppressive this role is, as we know how unhappy Poppy has been, we need to actually stop for a moment and acknowledge just how difficult of a choice that must have been for Poppy herself. Being the Maiden is the only thing Poppy has ever known. It's her whole identity. And if she isn't the Maiden anymore, then who is she? And even if Poppy is ready to take the leap and try to discover who she can be outside of this role, taking Hawkeye to bed means saying goodbye to all the people she ever cared about, as she realizes that more likely than not she will never be able to go back to the place she used to call home. And if all of that wasn't enough, Poppy has to deal with the repercussions of what losing her as the Maiden would do to the world, to her people. She's the one who's supposed to bring peace, after all. So yes, Poppy decides to abandon her role as the Maiden, to hook up with Hawkeye, just to realize a little too late that Hawkeye has also betrayed her, that he has also been lying to her all this time. Now, don't get me wrong, I have said it before and I'll say it again, I love Hawkeye. He's my favorite part of this whole novel, and since I've read the books that follow, I can say with certainty that his and Poppy's story just gets better and better as the series progresses. And yet, I would be lying if I didn't point out that Poppy stabbing Hawkeye straight to the heart didn't bring me the satisfaction it did. Hawkeye deserved what he got. He found a way to get close to Poppy with the intention of kidnapping her, killing her, or exchanging his brother's life for hers. And yes, I understand why he did what he did, as in he acted in the best interest of his own people. He was doing what had to be done in order to fight the bigger evil. But that doesn't mean that he didn't lie to Poppy or manipulate her in order to get the outcome that is convenient to his cause. He still took her to bed and let her sacrifice her whole life without telling her the truth. So yes, this stab to the heart was exactly what Hawkeye deserved. That being said, I'm so very glad he can't be killed this easily. Now, if you have only read this first book, I feel like it's important to point out that in my opinion, this one is the weakest in this series, at least from the fantasy standpoint. And you should absolutely give the sequels a try. The story, which in this novel only scratches the surface, grows into something of unpredictable proportions. And if you have read the follow-ups, I want to ask you, how do you think From Blood and Ash stacks up compared to its sequels? To me, From Blood and Ash didn't feel insanely original or groundbreaking, as well as the world we stepped into didn't feel incredibly thought through. It's also predictable and weirdly paced, as in 70% of the novel was used for introductory purposes, while the last 30% felt like a different book altogether. And yet, despite that, I couldn't put this novel down. And maybe it was so addictive because I grew up watching Twilight, True Blood, and Vampire Diaries. Or maybe because I love reading about the powerful, kick-ass first, ask questions later type of women who only seem to make an appearance in fantasy novels. Or maybe simply because I can't seem to be able to shake off my crush on Hawkeye, but I lived and breathed Blood and Ash series. But that's just my opinion. What about yours?